I have to apologize and admit that this kind of came together last minute. And so I typically do this training for our physician assistants here at Wichita State in a half day kind of thing. So I'm going to be I didn't get a chance to work through my slide deck and shorten it up for you. So I'm going to be kind of flipping around and I'm trying to make sure I highlight the important parts for all of you and what I want to share. Um, so let me go ahead here and share my screen, pull up my little program here. Oops. All right. Can I see some reactions if everyone has seen this? Maybe some thumbs up or
Yeah, we can see it. Looks good.
perfect. All right,
All right.
great. It's hard to tell with this. So let me tell you a little bit more about myself and my background. I am a clinical psychologist in Kansas, and I have the pleasure of serving as our assistant for vice president for wellness at Wichita State University, and I'm the chief psychologist here. This program is very near and dear to my heart, as it is, I'm sure many of you, we've all been touched at some way in our life by mental health and suicide, um, either directly or indirectly. When I first came to Wichita State as a first generation college student, transfer student, 25 years ago at the university, that was a really difficult year for me, as transitions really are in our lives. And I had no idea, how difficult that year would become. I had lost connections with a lot of my friends, a lot of my peers, and I had put a lot of energy into one relationship. And when that relationship started to have problems, there I was, finding myself going through a clinical depression. And I had no idea that there were quality mental health services available to me as a student on campus. We just did not talk about mental health and the importance of, taking care of our mental health as much back in the late 90s as we do today. So I'm thankful for that. So I've made it part of my mission to make sure that every student who comes on campus, from the moment they join orientation or hop on a Zoom call, that they are aware of where they can go when they start to experience challenges, because we all go through challenges. We all have ups and downs on our journeys, and it's figuring out how to sustain ourselves through those journeys and know where we can get the help. I think that is important in pre-planning. This program became very important to me. We had gotten a campus suicide prevention grant to create a campus suicide prevention program. And I had the privilege of serving on that grant and being part of the team. And it was the same month that we got our funding that a healthcare provider's, worst nightmare happened. And I lost a student who had come to me for help to suicide. And if you have experienced a loss like that, you know how devastating it is, how it rocks your whole world, and it makes you question whether or not, you can continue doing the work that you do. You can find a lot of blame and a lot of guilt. So I look back and I feel like I was very fortunate to be able to work on this program, because I know I tried to create meaning out of that suffering and that experience by throwing myself into this program and into the advocate role. Because if we can save just one person, and if I can help just one person, from having to go through what I went through, then it would all be worth it. And so I'm very honored to, be able to share some information about our program, and then hopefully touch a little bit on some clinical um, information and updates in the field on how you can be more suicide specific and targeted in your practice and the work that you do, as well as talk about our population-based mental health, our mental wellness and suicide prevention program that we have developed. And so I think I'll skip this today since we're short on time. But normally I just like to open up with some deep breathing. So go ahead and do that now. Maybe connect with your breath. Take a few centering breaths. And know that this is a heavy topic, and it can be pretty challenging, but I hope it will also give some insight and could be healing as well for you. But if you find yourself at any time throughout the talk, please know that you can reconnect to your breath, and just take a few moments to take care of yourself as you need. One of the things I like to talk about with audiences is, the stigma that we have around mental health. All of us are susceptible to common colds, and we don't always get any medical attention for that, because we know that it will go away on its own. There's no cure. There's over-the-counter medications. We, stay home, get plenty of rest, drink plenty of fluids. But there are times when that common cold may turn into something else, and seeking a healthcare professional's attention would be a wise thing to do. And typically that is when it's been lasting longer, it's not going away, and the symptoms are getting more severe. The same is true for our mental health. We are all susceptible with challenges at our mental health from time to time. And not always do we need to seek a healthcare professional for that. We might be able to make some lifestyle changes and things may improve on their own. However, if it's been typically what we like to say longer than 2 weeks, it's been very persistent and it's getting worse and it doesn't seem to be going away, that may be a time for one to think about, seeking services. But even when we know we have that sinus infection and we know that we could go, talk to a healthcare professional and that would help, we still don't always go get the help that we need. And there are lots of reasons that stand in people's way. It might be time, it might be finances, it might be childcare. We're oftentimes looking at lots of social determinants of health here. Do you have paid sick leave? Do you have insurance? Are you living in a community that has access to healthcare professionals? So all of these things get in our way. And I don't know about you, but for me, when my laundry list of things to do is a mile long, typically I am the bottom of that. I'm skipping lunches, I'm working late, I'm not going to exercise, I'm not eating well, I'm not getting as much sleep as I should, and let alone trying to navigate, a complicated healthcare system. But one of the things I want to also point out when we're dealing with mental health is we have that extra barrier, and that is stigma. The shame that we experience and the stigma that we have in our society around mental health. And when we're depressed, we don't want to do much of anything, let alone navigate a complicated healthcare system and a system that we know is overwhelmed right now. And so that is why we need each other, I think, so desperately during these times. because it's hard to take care of our own hygiene, let alone get the help that we need. So our call to action is that this is when we need our community to come together. We need more connectedness, that we need each other more than anything during this time. For many organizations, I asked them to look at this list and think, what are you dealing with? And if you stop and look at it, I imagine you're dealing with a little bit of all of them. And like what I like to stress is that while yes, it is important that people like us, licensed healthcare providers, are there to help treat the fish, and we need to increase our pipeline and address our capacity issues. To treat the fish, we also need to be looking at what's wrong with our water. On a societal level, what can we do really to make our cultures support each other's mental wellness more? And so if we can focus on upstream approaches, reducing stigma around mental health, encouraging people to reach out and to get help and to talk and be vulnerable, then the idea is that we can prevent the more severe consequences of a lot of human suffering and despair when we're looking at substance use disorders, suicide risk, and things of that nature. So I'll often get talks, for folks who want me to come and talk about wellness or mental health, and they might go, I don't know that we should talk about suicide. And I really think that's just stigma, because you can't, talk about one without the other. They're very much related. So this is a blueprint that was put together by the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention on just what all needs to be involved when you're trying to change cultures to promote mental health and to prevent suicide. And you'll see it's a lot of different buckets there. What I like to stress is it's not just a training. It has to be fully comprehensive and integrated into the fiber of your organization's culture. And the more, industries that we can work with, the more we can impact society as a whole. And at an organizational level, we absolutely have to have the buy-in of the leadership, and the leadership has to be engaged on this. Being visible, vocal, and vulnerable about the importance of mental health and modeling, healthy culture. I think oftentimes organizations take on the personalities of their leaders. And if you have a toxic leader, then you oftentimes have a toxic organization. And so being in a leadership position, we need to think about how are we promoting mental wellness. So the program that we created, we tried to look at that framework and implement that framework into a program that we could address on campus. And what I always like to say when I'm doing trainings and community trainings is that it's so much more than just a training, and that this training doesn't stop. I like to think of the trainings that we do as installation workshops, where we are giving people information, tools, and resources that then you can then go out and be advocates to help try and inform change. The program that we developed is a strategic, comprehensive approach, to helping organizations reduce mental health stigma, to strengthen their connections, to improve emotional well-being, and encourage help seeking. We've broken it down into a 4-part approach that relies heavily on our awareness campaign, the Suspenders for Hope public health awareness campaign, our promoting mental wellness and preventing suicide trainings that we do on campus and in the communities. And then we also have a wellness card curriculum and advocate program. So I'll talk a little bit more about these in detail. Our campaign, you'll see these banners on our campus all over. They're 6-foot vinyl banners, and they're in every major building on campus. And this is really what we want members of our community to do. We want all of us to talk openly about mental health, helping to normalize it and to reduce that stigma. And while we are going to talk about, how do we check in on those who are displaying warning signs of distress, it's also just as important to reach out for help before something becomes a crisis. So check in on each other, but also know your warning signs and when you're starting to spiral, and make sure that you are getting the support that you need early before it becomes a problem. We worked with our marketing team on campus to see if this campaign was having an impact. And we found that students who were familiar with the Suspenders for Hope campaign and knew what it stood for were much more likely to believe that the university cared about their well-being as a person. We also developed our own training after the first 3 years of having the grant, where we had brought in a lot of outside national trainings, and we had found that we were having a hard time getting our campus to engage in those workshops. That some of them were all day long, and it was hard to get people to commit to that. And it was hard to be doing an awareness campaign while also trying to promote a training. So we thought, why don't we just combine these, do them together? Let's coordinate and streamline the message so we have greater impact. So we created our own training, and then we started giving our shirts out as an incentive for individuals to complete the training. And in that first year, we saw a 426% increase in the number of individuals that we trained than we had in the whole 3-year period of the grant. Now we've trained thousands of individuals, both on campus and in the community and online. We have our training is free online. And I just came this morning. I just came from this morning. I actually was meeting with Carrie Bond today at our Vet to Vet command, and we were doing the training there. And I am happy to say I think Carrie is going to sign up and become one of our certified trainers, which is an option that'll be available to you all if you're interested in that. So then we have these wellness cards. And so the ideas behind these was, how do we sneak the spinach in the smoothie? And how can we, because this can't just be all on mental health services. We're an overwhelmed, system, organization anyway. And it's really got to be all of us. We all have to be helping to address this. And so we wanted to think, what's an easy way that I can get the engineering professor to talk to their students about mental wellness in the classroom? But not only do we want to just have someone talking about mental wellness, we really want to foster face-to-face connections, because the more disconnected we are, the more stuck on our screens we become. I think the more we're seeing our mental health suffer as a result of that. So we really wanted our students to be talking to each other about these issues. And when we do these trainings, I pull out cards, and they're very easy. You need no training, no formal training in how to do this. You can just do little check-ins. There's a little thing for the instructor to read with their class. And now we've adapted them for workplaces. We've adapted them in Spanish. We're working on Vietnamese resources as well. And just, letting people know you don't have to be a mental health professional with a license or a background in this area to infuse some mental wellness tips into your daily operations. All right. We're going to, like I said, we're going to be skipping some of these slides so I can condense it. We don't have time to do a card here. The last thing we ask it for is people to then be our advocates. So if you've gone through a training, We find that many people want to make an impact on this issue because it's touched all of our lives. And they want to know, how can I be involved? How can I make a difference? And if we can just break it down into simple, small steps of what people can do to get involved in our campaign, and as well what they can do to promote mental wellness in the classroom, as well as what our leaders can do to really take a strong stance around the importance of this program and the messages within, um, that people are more than willing to help and join in. We have started working with other organizations to customize the resources that we created at Wichita State to be able to take it into their communities, co-brand it, co-license it, and customize it to their colors. This, we worked with Ascension Via Christi, which is a large hospital and healthcare system here in Wichita, Kansas, through a Kohl's Care grant that they had to customize the materials, and then brought it to a local high school where we trained all of the students. We had the shirts in their school colors and cards in their colors, and got them to all their teachers and trainings, and just tried to help make a really big impact on their culture. We've been programming with a lot of different organizations to help do this, and whether that be in healthcare or in education or in the food service industry. I think we all really need this. I wonder if this will take me to our video. Can you hear the volume?
No, I can't hear it.
Okay, I think I need to go back to my original share screen.
I think you have to look at the share where it says.
Yeah, I need to go back and click that little button. I forgot to do that. Okay, let me stop share. Stop share. No, go share screen. Share sound. All right, I hope this should work.
With our mental health at some point in our lives. Talking about our mental health is what helps people heal, is what helps them know they're not alone, and it's what encourages them to get help. There has been a lot of great work done around reducing mental health stigma in our society, and the workplace is the next frontier. The We Support You, Suspenders for Hope mental wellness and suicide prevention program is a strategic, comprehensive approach to help organizations enhance their mental wellness culture.
Ascension Via Christi has the largest behavioral health service line in the state of Kansas. And so we see people every single day who have attempted suicide or are expressing thoughts about suicide. For a long time, Ascension Via Christi and Wichita State have had a really solid partnership that has benefited our community. Development of the Suspenders for Hope program was kind of a natural progression of that partnership that we already have to begin to tackle the huge issue of suicide in our community.
We took this idea of suspenders supporting your pants and expanded it to how can we empower communities to support each other in their mental health. After our success at the university, workplaces have actually started coming to us wanting help on how do we address this with our teams. And we feel like we've provided a package that is very easy to implement and something that you don't have to be a professional with a mental health background to do this.
Mental health training should absolutely be a part of every single workplace's training. I am the general manager of a restaurant in Thrive Restaurant Group. I recently took a training course in Austin, Texas on the Suspenders for Hope program, and it's incredible because I actually used the training to help a team member of mine get through a really tough time. I took her in the office and I just said, let me tell you a story. And during my story, you could see her face just lit up. And after I was done, she opened up to me and she told me how she was feeling. And right away, I grabbed the Suspenders for Hope sheet that I got from my conference and I handed it to her. And I said, please reach out. Our company is involved in this and they will take care of you. The program could not be any better. It was right after I got back from the training and I had instantly helped somebody.
When you complete the training, you get a free shirt, and this then becomes a sign to your organization, to your community, that you are an advocate for mental wellness.
Through a grant we received from Kohl's, we were able to offer the Suspenders for Hope training to all of the associates who work for Ascension Via Christi in Wichita. We were able to take the Suspenders for Hope t-shirt that Wichita State uses, customize it for Via Christi, and we allow any associate to wear the t-shirt to work any day. It is really a visible sign of support. We have seen such a positive impact of Suspenders for Hope training with our associates. We have stories about how this training has saved lives.
I didn't originally take the training, but my manager talked to me about his experience with taking the training for Suspenders for Hope, and after that I decided to take the class as well. I didn't think I'd ever need to use that training, but the few weeks after I took the class, I had a call that a friend was in crisis and needed help. So I felt comfortable calling 911 and going to her house. So she initially didn't want to go to the hospital, but I was using the terms I learned in that class to help her understand she needed to get help and get to a safe place, which she did agree to do, and we got her the help that she needed. She came to the hospital, she got stabilized, and then got her outpatient treatment as well. I'm really thankful that I did take that class. I never expected to use it, but it was life-saving for my friend. So I'm thankful that Ascension Via Christi sponsored this class and that Wichita State put the class together. Although no one ever wants to use this training, it's so valuable to have in case you're in that situation and you need to take action to help someone.
This program works in any industry, whether that be healthcare, education, manufacturing, the food service industry. It really has applications to help. This can be a difficult topic, and it can be challenging for organizations to try and tackle it. The Suspenders for Hope is designed to help celebrate resiliency and to help us all know that we have a role to play and that we can support each other.
Okay. And so, yes, our training is available for free online. If any of you, want to use that in your organization, please, I encourage you to use that. I'll also share some information at the end of our talk on how, if you want to become a certified trainer to do in-person trainings, how we might be able to partner to do that. And so now I'm going to really fly through some of these slides. This is a lot of the content that we do, when we're doing the community training on how to be aware of our warning signs and things like, things like that. And then I want to spend the majority of our time on the last slide that I have, which is some additional trainings for behavioral health care providers and what you can do to really, increase the suicide-specific treatment that you're providing in your practices. So this talks a little bit about what we cover in the training and how important it is that when we're dealing with depression that we have our supports with us. And these are the number 2 reasons why people don't typically intervene in a mental health crisis, is because they're afraid they're going to make it worse or they're not going to know what to say. So we really want to help people get to the point where they're okay talking about suicide like they're okay talking about a hamburger. And you actually have to get there. If you're not okay and comfortable bringing that up and talking about it with your patients, then I really challenge you to get more used to that and to talk about it just like you would, any other topic. You know, as a three-time clinician loss survivor, it is important for us to realize that it is no one's responsibility to save anyone or to solve anyone's problem for them. And that hindsight can be incredibly cruel and unfair. And that's why we really stress in our training that it is just as important, to reach out for help as it is to be checking in with others. I want to stress for all of you, if you're not already doing this, that you really pay attention to the language that you use when we're talking about suicide, because we can either be contributing to stigma or helping to reduce it. And so when we continue to say things like someone committed suicide, that perpetuates the stigma that someone who died by suicide did something that is illegal, that is criminal, that is sinful, that is evil, that is wrong. And I can understand, our history of where we came from that, when there's good intentions, because we don't want suicide. We want to reduce suicides. But when we come at our problems from a place of fear and control, and not at a place of love and compassion, then I think that is when we continue to push people into the dark, and people aren't able to share that, what they're dealing with, and they suffer in silence and alone. Thankfully, we're doing a lot of good work within faith communities, and in, trainings like this to help reduce that stigma, so we can better understand, just what is going on in a suicidal person's mind, and a mind under siege, I like to talk about. So we want to stop saying committed and just use terms like someone died by suicide, or someone completed suicide, someone took their own life. We want to move away from saying things like someone had a successful or a failed suicide attempt. And when we're talking about attempts, we simply just say someone had an attempt or survived an attempt. It's also important for us, just in our casual language, to try and reduce stigma. Sometimes you will hear people flippantly say, oh, just shoot me now, or, I'd rather be dead, things like that. That can be very insensitive to, people and their lived experience when we just say things like that. As well as, and this is one that I continue to struggle with, things like saying that's so crazy or that's insane. And we really want to, not be using those kinds of pejorative terms in our daily language. And I try to say things like that's so wild, or there's better terms that we can use when we're talking about our experience that does not contribute to stigma. This is another slide that I think is important. I want us to spend some time on. And for me, this really helped when I was learning about the issue, that there are 12 million people in this country who report having serious suicidal thoughts each year. And I'd like for you just to, look at those options there and ask yourself, what percentage of those do you think die by suicide? And I think you might be surprised to realize, that while one life lost to suicide is one too many, that overwhelmingly, overwhelmingly, 99.6% of people survive that crisis. So this really turns the thing on, flips the pyramid on its head. And it shows us that we have a lot of silent sufferers. Millions of people every year overcome suicidal despair and suffering, and they find a way out of that. And it's by sharing those lived experiences and those stories of hope that we can actually really start to change, uh, the stigma and help bring this issue out of the darkness and into the light. So I want to share with you. I am going to pull up one of our videos here. I want to share with you some stories that we do from our lived experience video series. We call these our stories for hope. Share screen, share set.
Amber Claver, and this is my story. This is actually my second time getting sober. I started using substances when I was about 14, so about the same time I had my first depression diagnosis. Most of my life I have struggled with mental health problems, depression, anxiety, ADHD. Throughout those years and sometimes still today, I've experienced very dark periods of time in my life. The classical depression symptoms, the low self-worth, the feelings of hopelessness and despair, thinking I don't have anything to offer the world, thinking there's something wrong with me. I've definitely struggled with those feelings a lot, to the point of being suicidal. I fortunately never attempted to take my life. I always was able to either find some resources or have the support that I needed to get through those dark times. Throughout my years struggling with depression and with those symptoms, I also developed an addiction to alcohol and would use other substances as well. I have just over 3 years sober now, and that's helped me tremendously with my mental health. I would just use alcohol as a means of escaping and avoiding my feelings, avoiding responsibilities. I was a functioning alcoholic. I was able to hold down a job, I had a family, we owned a home, and earned a couple different graduate degrees. So I was able to do those things. I knew that I had a problem the whole time. It was just that I didn't quite know how to quit and wasn't ready to commit to quitting. I was working on my doctorate, and it was a couple years into the program. I had a beautiful baby girl. Actually, I had her my first year of the program. That was a surprise. She was 4 or 5 when I sobered up. And, you know, I was a high-functioning alcoholic. I didn't abuse her, but one thing that I did do, which I'm ashamed to say, was I would drive under the influence of alcohol. You know, in my head, I told myself, like, oh, I'm in control here. I'm not that drunk. I'm not whatever. But I knew that, you know, I'm taking a risk with my daughter, whether it's getting into legal trouble and having her taken from me, or God forbid, hurting her in an accident or somebody else. I think just realizing that how much of a better mom I could be for my daughter, just really seeing her and seeing how much I was letting her down. I just didn't spend that quality time with her the way I should. I was able to just kind of decide to quit. I was going to therapy. I attended hot yoga faithfully, and it was a very, very hard class that made me want to die while I was in there, but it really helped me with the early year, like the first year of sobriety. I had family support, just my medications that I used for my depression. I think the hardest part of it for me was just breaking the ties with the people that I would use for drinking with. Some of the ways that I've learned to cope with the depression, first, just taking care of my basic needs, so making sure that I get 8 hours of sleep and prioritizing that and not feeling selfish about that, making sure that I schedule playtime into my day and time to get out into the sun. Physical activity has been a huge staple for me. And then adding like the social community aspect, which is why having this job here at the Phoenix has been so great for me, because we do both. You know, it's physical activity, it's positive support. I do therapy regularly, and I have medical treatments that I use. For me, it's, you know, it was about finding a doctor that I trusted and who was willing to work with me and try all the different things and kind of just figure out what works for me. Things that help me to stay sober. This job, just being in a position where I'm surrounded by other people who are in recovery, so being connected to those people that are experiencing similar things or have, similar experiences has really helped. The message that I have, and one reason that I am truly thankful that I've experienced what I have with mental illness as well as with substance abuse and addiction, because now I'm able to help other people. So being able to share my story and offer a message of hope is so important to me. I believe that talking about our issues is the only way we're going to break down stigma associated with mental illness, especially, and addiction, because they're very common things, and they're a choice. People don't choose to be depressed or choose to be addicts. So I think I just want to spread that message of hope and let people know that, like, no matter how bad it is or how dark it seems, keep fighting, find what works for you, try different things. If you get with a therapist and that isn't a good fit for you, find another one. If you get a diagnosis that you feel like, doesn't hit you right, get a second opinion, like, keep trying, keep fighting. You will find what, your combination, your cocktail. I don't know if that's appropriate to use, but hang in there. Don't give up. It will get better.
Hello and welcome to the
Not sure that we can. Okay, so getting back to our presentation, I'm really just so proud of Amber, and think she does an amazing job. That is so relatable to so many people, of sharing, her experience, and those stories are available on our Suspenders for Hope YouTube channel. So if you want to view some of the other videos that we have made, we have our Dean of Students talking about, his experience with anxiety, depression, panic attacks, our student government president talking about his experience with suicidal ideation. We have lots of different stories up there to share and normalize, this experience. And if you ever want to use those in any of your outreach, please feel free to go ahead and do that. And so now I'm just going to kind of go through this data really quickly. Of course, this is our suicide rate compared to the homicide rate, and we know that men die at a higher rate while women attempt. We know that we believe that means is a big contributor of that. Here is the different rates of suicide by ethnic groups, with Alaskan Indians and Native Americans here being the highest rate, followed by your white Caucasian, and then there's the overall rate. And then the lowest rates of suicide are seen in our Black, African American, Hispanic, and Asian Pacific Islanders. Regardless of what ethnic group, members of our LGBTQ plus community experience rates of suicide at the highest rate. And I think it's, there's data that shows if just one person in an LGBTQ person's life can be accepting of, who they are, then that can really help reduce that risk. When we're looking at, access to care, social determinants of health, generations of oppression and genocide, we think about why we have some of these higher rates, and conversely, when we're thinking about, strong community connections, and while yes, oppression and discrimination, but also strong histories of resiliency, and some strong, cultural and possible religious beliefs that might be protecting some of these other communities. Those are some ideas of why these numbers might be different. Of course, the highest rate of suicide is seen in middle-aged adults, particularly white males. And so I do believe that, rugged individualism is quite literally killing us. When we look at our views of masculinity and men and mental health, we absolutely need to be reducing that stigma for our for our men, and realize that human suffering and mental health issues are something that is common to the human experience, and we need to be getting help for that. We'll just run through very quickly some of the risk factors. Of course, there is nothing that predicts suicide at any consistent way, but there are some risk factors that might make someone more at risk, but it's definitely not a cause. And then we'll talk about what some of the protective factors are, and then what a common precipitating event might be. I think the important thing to take away is that we should never oversimplify a cause of suicide to a precipitating event. Suicide is a complex, complicated issue that is oftentimes something someone battles for their whole life. That is a mix of personal and family history, untreated, mental health conditions, substance use issues that are swirling around that might make someone more at risk. But we really should not oversimplify causes and say that bullying causes suicide, that someone lost their job and that's what causes suicide. Millions of people go through that every year, and they find a way to overcome. And those are the stories we want to highlight. So here are some common risk factors. If you're not already doing this in your intakes, you really need to be assessing past suicidal behaviors, asking about, past attempts, past plans. Even if it's not something that is current ideation, you really should be assessing if there is past behavior. So we know that these are some common risk factors. I'll let you just look at those so we can kind of get through this. Some of the protective factors, that are there, and definitely growing connectedness. And for you, I would say, really working with your patients on helping them develop coping skills and tools that they can use. If you're not a DBT trained therapist, dialectical behavior therapy, that's a therapy that I happen to be trained in. I worked in an inpatient hospital where I would do those groups with individuals who are being treated for an acute suicidal crisis. And now at the university, I've been teaching DBT coping skills for the last, almost 20 years now. And, I think it's really important that we help people build their toolkit of what they can do when they're in distress. So here are some of those common precipitating events. And I like to think of these as just that last final straw that maybe was kind of broke the camel's back, but definitely not a cause. This for me was highly important for me to learn and to realize, and is that typically people might be thinking about suicide. It might be something they battle for their whole life, but attempts actually often follow an acute crisis. So suicide attempts are often very impulsive, and they're a response to an immediate crisis. I've had some survivors explain to me that it was like being in a burning room, and the only thing I could do was jump out, and so we're all born with this innate, survival instinct. And if someone can calm down from that, heightened sense of emotional and, physiological arousal, to calm down, that can be enough of what it takes to get somebody through that crisis and to avoid an attempt. Now, of course, there are some of the smaller percentage of people who had been planning it. But the majority of people, less than 10, 30 minutes to an hour. I think some new research by in the military shows that it was 75% of people in less than an hour were when they decided to make an attempt. So that is why it is so important to look at means restriction and making environment suicide safer. This is a common myth, that people who want to die will find a way. That's just not true. The suicidal crisis and the person in crisis is not necessarily wants to die. They want their pain to end. And if we can put time in between that person and a method, that can greatly reduce or increase the chance that they will survive that crisis. And so things like, asking a trusted loved one to, take firearms in times of crisis, when families are going through heightened, trauma and difficulties. And if someone is not willing to, turn their firearms over to someone else, how can we do safe storage? Using gun safes, storing ammunition separately, locking them up, using gun locks, things of that nature, to just put as many steps as we can in between the person and their method. One of the things we do at the university a lot when we're safety planning with our patients is we'll have them put their means in the trunk of their car. And so, they live in the residence halls. They got to get up, they got to get dressed, they got to get their keys, they got to walk outside, they got to walk to their car. And by that time, oftentimes the crisis might have passed. So if you are not assessing, firearm, if your patients are firearm owners, and if you're not talking about how you can make environment suicide safer, and incorporating families in that and doing some collaborative safety planning with your patient's support system, I highly recommend that you do that, and you start doing that today. Of course, there is quite a spectrum, from very passive thoughts, and it's quite possible that all of us at some point in our life might have the thought. But ambivalence is typically very high, and that's where one side of the person wants the pain to end and one side wants it to live. Kevin Hines, he shares his story. If you have not seen him, I highly recommend it. He talks about that ambivalence. I really think we also need to be combining our work when we're doing suicide prevention work, mental health promotion work, that we should be combining with our substance and recovery community to be talking about both issues. Because after someone dies of an accidental overdose, if there's no evidence of intent, it can be really hard to know if you're dealing with a suicide or an accidental overdose. And so I think we really just need to be addressing human suffering and despair collectively, looking at deaths of despair. And while, yes, we know that fentanyl and, has been really rising these overdose deaths, it's important to remember that alcohol is still the #1 killer in our community, and that the rates of suicide related deaths went up 25% in COVID. So that shows me that a lot of people don't know how to cope. Here's our fentanyl related deaths in Sedgwick County. And this is our map of Sedgwick County that just shows that this is not an issue that just happens in some neighborhoods. It's happening all over our county. And we need to be engaging in harm reduction. We've been talking about how to use alcohol in a safer way, and we need to be doing the same with prescription drugs. And our healthcare needs to get better. There are definitely, very valid reasons why people would need to be using prescription opioid medications. And oftentimes, after the need for those medications is no longer there, it's very hard to get off of those. And we need to reduce the stigma from patients being able to talk to their providers about the dependence, and how do we increase access to medicated assisted treatments to help people get off of those, and really encourage everyone to have Narcan and naloxone on hand. It should be in our purses, our backpacks, our medicine cabinets at home, and just something that we have available to everyone. The share ask support is our method, what we train people to do. When you were younger, you probably learned what to do if you caught on fire. And I'm sure you're all saying stop, drop, and roll right now. That must have been the best training you ever went to. So you still remember that. And we hope that people, if they find themselves in a mental health crisis, that they use this share, ask, support method. So this is what we do for our community training, helping people learn what are some of the warning signs and how to go through this process. And we run them through some scenarios doing the share, ask, support method. I want to get to our last couple of slides here. Of course, I hope you all are aware of 988 and that you also know about the crisis text line 741 741, pressing 1 for veterans, and that the Trevor line as well, which is a crisis line for LGBTQ plus individuals to know that the person they're talking to will be affirming of their identity on the other line. And it doesn't just have to be a suicidal crisis. So I hope that you're using these in your safety plans with people. But now here is our hope and our dream. This idea came to me after teaching years of DBT and encouraging people to create their own hope kits and coping skills that they could, this is just what to turn to when your mind is overwhelmed. How do I get that help? They can go straight to this. And our dream is that one day we can deliver hope kits to every person who seeks emergency psychiatric services. So they know in that moment that they are loved, that they are not alone, and that there are supports. We're partnering with NAMI, which is a National Alliance on Mental Illness. It's one of the #1 peer support areas. And I really do believe that building up our peer support is one of the answers, to this crisis. Let's see. So here are some of our, and knowing about postvention, those who've lost someone to suicide, we need to be able to accompany those through their grief and their pain and use, help them because they are at a higher risk of suicide. Whew. Now, here are some of the trainings that I highly recommend that you look into for further professional development if you're trying to get more suicide specific in your care. There's the free CALM training, which is called Counseling on Access to Lethal Means, which will help you feel more confident talking to your patients and their families about how to make their environment suicide safer. Here's a patient safety screener. If you're not screening for suicide at every clinical contact, like is recommended in the Zero Suicide Model, which was founded at the Henry Ford Clinic, I highly recommend, that you do that. Here in our center, every patient, when they come in, they fill out a symptom inventory at every clinical contact. And we're asking about their suicidal level of suicidal ideation. And then that really guides our treatment decisions on what we do. Following up with that, we use the CAMS model here, which was developed by David Jobs. It's called the Collaborative Assessment Model of Suicide. And this is a way that you can partner with your patient to really look at what are the things that are driving that suicidal crisis. I highly recommend that training. The CAMs are free for you to download and use online. You can look that up, and we have all of our providers go through that training when they come and work here, our trainees and our licensed folks as well. Of course, we do offer dialectical behavior therapy, skills training groups here. And if you don't already have a safety plan that you're using, the Stanley Brown is a free one that you can use. And if you haven't done the AMSR training, the assessment and management of suicide risk, that is another training that I recommend. One of the things we want to get away from is the PHQ-9. That screener just is not suicide specific. And things like this PSS are better, or the Ask ASQ. They do a better job of really looking at, is there suicidal ideation? Has it been in the last 2 weeks? And then guiding some of those treatment recommendations. So, I am over time. I was supposed to stop. There's all you can find of our stuff at Suspenders for Hope. And if you're interested in becoming one of our trainers, this is the QR code to do so. So Dr. Brand, I am happy to finish up here. If you want to reach out to us, you can reach out at suspenders4hope@wichita.edu, or there's my email address. Yeah, and we'll stop sharing.
Yeah, I have one question. So I saw you talked about zero suicide, and the state here in Oklahoma has put a lot of emphasis in zero suicide. So you see those as pretty compatible and supporting each other in terms of programmatics?
Absolutely. So the zero suicide framework, which was developed at the Henry Ford Clinic, really is a way to look at your healthcare system and to go through and see what kind of policies and procedures that do we have that promote suicide safer care. So are we doing screening at every clinical contact? And the Henry Ford Clinic, what they did, every contact, just like we take blood pressure, just like we listen to heart rate, we're screening for this. And then internally, we create policies to do warm handoffs to behavioral health if someone screens positive for suicide risk. So that zero suicide framework really is compatible with like a training that we would have, like our evidence-based training. We're more of a community training. That zero suicide framework is looking at how do we make our healthcare system, something that's really looking at this. So yeah, they're very compatible.
Good. Well, any other questions for Dr. Provence before we wrap up here? We're a few minutes over. Well, we certainly thank you for stepping in at the last minute and giving us this important presentation. And if it's okay with you, can we get a PDF of your presentation if people request it?
Yes, I can send you some of our stuff. I can send you something, Mike.
If you can send that to Kelsey, then she keeps that handy for when people request it. So either me and or Kelsey, and then we'll have whatever you want to release of your presentation in a PDF, and then people can request it and they can use it. And we'll put you on the list and have you come back next year, but we'll do it in a little bit more timely fashion.
Well, I really appreciate all of your time today. I'm sorry that I went over. There's so much content to cover when we're looking at assessment, treatment, and prevention of suicide. And so it's hard to really know, what nuggets to share with you, but I appreciate all of your time.
We appreciate it, and I hope everybody has a good, safe weekend. And Lenore will be talking next week, so she got a surprise for us, so you can tune in next week. Lenore will have something for us. But y'all take care and have a good weekend. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.